Hey folks, I want to take a look at the acronym All Students Take Calculus. This is going to be dealing with where each trigonometric function is positive and where it's negative. First comment that I'd like to make is that your sines and your cosecants are always going to have the same pos or neg sign simply because they're reciprocals of each other. Same with cosine and secant. They'll always have the same pos or neg. Tangent, cotangent as well. They'll always have the same pos or neg. What I'd like to look at first is the sine values. And remember we talked about sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Think about if the theta is at the origin, then the opposite is always going to be the y value and the hypotenuse will be the radius or the r value. So right now I'm focused on my y values. So in the first quadrant, we understand that in the first quadrant, all of my y values are going to be positive. And so a positive y value divided by a positive radius is going to cause a positive sine value. In the second quadrant, again, my y values are still going to be positive. So therefore my sine and my cosecant are both going to be positive. In the third quadrant, however, my sine value is now going to be negative because the y value is negative. And in the fourth quadrant, the y value is still going down. It's still negative. So in the fourth quadrant, sine and cosecant are both going to be negative. Talking about cosine, this is going to be cosine or ca adjacent over hypotenuse. So again, if the theta is at the origin, the adjacent will be the x value. So for cosines, we're going to be dealing with the adjacent over the hypotenuse or the x value over the radius. So in the first quadrant, all of my x values are positive, radius is still positive, so that's going to be positive. In the second quadrant, now my x values have turned negative, so my cosine values are going to be negative. Third quadrant, x values are negative. And in the fourth quadrant, the x values are back to being positive, so I have positive cosine values. My tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent. So last time, if my theta is at the origin, the opposite is the y value, the adjacent is the x value. So I'm looking at my y value divided by my x value. In the first quadrant, the y value is positive, the x value is positive, pos divided by pos is pos. In the second quadrant, the y value is positive, the x value is negative. So pos divided by neg is neg. In the third quadrant, both of my values are negative, so a negative divided by a negative is going to be positive. And for the fourth quadrant, the y value is negative, the x value is positive, negative divided by positive is going to be negative. Now, where does all students take calculus come into that? Well, the first thing is all is going to line up with the first quadrant where everything in the first quadrant is going to be positive. So all in the first quadrant are positive. Look at the second quadrant. Notice that the only positive in the second quadrant is the one that deals with sine. So students lines up with sine, the S in students, the S in sine. So it's only the sine that's going to be positive. In the third quadrant, the only positive is going to be the tangent. So the tangent is going to line up with take, t's. And then lastly, the only positive is the cosine. So the C in cosine lines up with the C in calculus. So all students take calculus. Tells what's positive in each quadrant.